Right, so the M2 iPad Pro's official, and to be honest, there's really not much that's different with these iPads, and it's why today I want to recommend you guys get the M1 instead. And so let's delve into my reasons why I think this. So my first big reason is pretty obvious, and that's the fact the M2 iPads aren't really massive refreshes. In fact, this essentially is just a chip refresh, and I'll get to why the M2 is not a major upgrade for the iPads. But apart from that, there are no other big changes. The hover feature seems kinda gimmicky on the iPads, and Wi-Fi 6E support's not a massive deal in my opinion, and so yeah, why pay more for basically the same iPads? This is very similar to the iPhone 13 and 14 situation, because the regular 14 was such a minor upgrade that I recommended many to get the 13 instead. And the situation's happening again with these iPads, where yes, you should just buy the M1 models from third-party retailers. Anyways, moving to the second reason, this is related to the 11-inch size, because for those who prefer that size, there is still no mini LED on this. So yes, Apple continues to neglect the 11-inch size and not give it this big display upgrade. And that honestly sucks, because if this did get mini LED, I would have recommended many get the 11-inch, but without it, this is a very minor refresh. And yes, I know that Tim wants to upsell you to the 12.9-inch iPads, but considering the iPhone Pros and the MacBook Pros have the same specs across both sizes, it's a real shame that's not the case with the iPad Pros. And yes, LCD's still pretty good, but it's also pretty old, so without the mini LED tech, I don't think the M2 11-inch is worth it. Now moving on to my next reason, this is also pretty simple, and that is the M1's already good enough for the iPad. So yes, with the Max, M2 does make a difference, you can take advantage of the extra performance, but with the M2 on the iPad you really won't be seeing much of a performance upgrade because, of course, the software does not take advantage of the horsepower these iPads have. I mean, I remember when the M1 iPad Pros came out, many of us were expecting big upgrades for iPadOS, but we've had iPadOS 15 and also 16 without any major upgrades. Stage Manager was somewhat major, but of course, it's still imperfect, and we really just want Apple to give us the ability to boot macOS on the iPads. I think it's time they do this. But if Apple does keep these iPads on the very restrictive iPadOS, then yeah, there's no point getting the M2 because apart from a few fringe cases, like artists who might get more layers with the performance of the M2, I don't think many consumers are going to benefit from the extra performance. So yes, if you want a powerful iPad, just get the M1 model instead. And yes, I know some may mention software support, and that brings me on to my next reason because no, I don't think software support's going to play a major factor into this. Since do remember, M1 was a major upgrade for the iPads. It was a massive boost over the A12X and the A12Z, and so considering the M2's a small upgrade over the M1, I think these iPads are going to lose support around the same time. I mean, this happens often with iPhones, but take a look at the 6S and the 7. Those came out 1 year apart, but of course, they lost support together because the A9 and the A10 are very similar for the most part. And so considering the iPad Air this year got the M1 chip, and we know the M2 is not a major upgrade, I'm personally expecting the M1 iPads and the M2 iPads to get similar software support. And at the very best, maybe the M2 gets 1 additional year, but considering the M1 still should get a minimum of 5 years of support, since iPads get support for years, I don't think you need to worry about support for the M1 iPads. It should still get years of support. Now my final reason is for those outside of the US, and that's the fact there are price hikes. So I'm not surprised by this because the iPhone 14's also got a major price increase, but yes, the iPad Pros outside of the US are way more expensive. And that's why I think most of you guys should get the M1, because you're getting 95% of the experience for a much lower price. And I highly doubt that Apple's going to cap software features for the M2 iPads. They should bring it down to all the iPads with M series chips, and so in my opinion there's no benefit getting the M2 iPads. And yeah, considering you could now get higher storage tiers of the M1 iPad Pros for less than the price of the base M2 iPad Pros, I think it's a no-brainer to get last year's models instead. But let's say you're not in a rush to upgrade, Well, in that case, you can wait for the next iPad Pros, which should get OLEDs, and that brings me to this new report. So essentially, they believe Apple suppliers are developing a hybrid OLED panel for the iPads that basically combines the benefits of a flexible and rigid panel. So you get the much better brightness, better colors, better contrast ratio from the flexible panels, essentially what the iPhones have. But obviously the big con with these panels is that they can crumple, and this effect is heavily apparent on larger panels. And while rigid panels don't face this because, as the name does suggest, they're much more rigid, and so combining these panels and giving us a hybrid OLED panel for these iPads would be perfect. Apparently it's also cheaper to make because, unlike flexible OLEDs, there is no backlighting layer needed, and so yeah, that's an advantage for us because Apple can keep prices the same while giving us better displays on these iPads. And yeah, Apple focusing on the durability makes sense because ultimately many of us do hold onto iPads way longer than iPhones, and so these panels are going to be in constant use for 5 to 7 years, and so yeah, there should not be any display issues. And by the way, for those worried about burning hybrid OLEDs, also do minimize that, though to be honest, Apple already does a pretty good job in the software to of course prevent this, and iPhones don't have major burn-in issues. So yeah, there's basically no con with OLEDs. I'm very excited for this change for the iPads, and we should also get this with MacBooks. Now, in case you're wondering when we're going to see these OLED iPads launch, it should be a 2024 release, so basically the next generation after the M2 iPad Pros, those should get this. And I'm praying the 11-inch also gets OLED because with mini LED they only gave it to the bigger size, and the poor 11-inch was left out and was stuck with LCD, so giving it the OLED upgrade would be nice. Oh, also want to mention that because there is no backlighting layer, these iPads can be thinner, but to be honest, I'm hoping Apple does not do that. iPads already bend as is, and making them even more fragile would be a bad idea, so yes, I'm praying this is not the case. They should just give us a bigger battery inside that takes advantage of the additional space. But yes, ultimately, if you're not in a rush to upgrade, I think the next iPad Pros might be a bigger upgrade with the new displays and maybe other features. But if you are on the market for a new iPad, then get the M1 models, but please do not get these M2 models. They're just not worth it. Anyways, those are my thoughts. But of course, tell me your thoughts regarding this in the comments. Anyways, thank you for watching, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumours. Check out the video in the clip above on details regarding the iPhone 15 series. And on that note, see ya peeps.